Hey, it's now 6 o'clock. I'm handing over to Dr. Muhali. Dr. Muhali, over to you. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues. A warm welcome and thank you for joining our webinar this evening. This webinar is part of a series of webinars that has been arranged by the South African Medical Association's Women's Wing in commemoration of Women's Month. And this evening we will be discussing the legal aspects that we as women in medicine are faced with. Because as women in medicine, we know that our personal and our professional lives are so deeply intertwined, and the legal decisions that we make can prove pivotal in shaping both our future security and success. This webinar therefore seeks to unpack the legal essentials that every woman doctor should know. Everything ranging from understanding changing marital regimes all the way through to securing your legacy. And without much further delay, I am privileged to introduce our first speaker, which will be Mrs. Letitia Volkswinkel. She is an attorney who has been admitted by the High Court of South Africa, and she holds an LLB from the University of South Africa. She spent a decade working with the South African Medical Association before relocating to Germany with her family, where she obtained her Master of Laws in Intellectual Property and Competition Law. She then spent 5 years abroad, and following her return to South Africa, we're fortunate enough to have had her rejoin SAMA, where she's been serving for the past year. Her area of expertise is that of labor law, a field which she finds both intellectually stimulating and personally rewarding, particularly as it pertains to matters around unfair labor practices and disputes. Letitia, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohale. Thank you so much for the introduction. It was kind of you. So, ladies, good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening. There might be a couple of gents with us as well, so I might as well say welcome to the gentleman that has also decided to join us. I'm going to share my screen in a second, and then we can kick off. There we go. Okay, so first of all, what I want to speak about tonight is the legal aspects facing women in medicine. So these issues are so broad, and I'm going to spend some more time on certain issues, and some issues I'm just going to touch on because I feel that some of them might be more important to you and you might enjoy hearing about them more. So I've listed the matters, I've categorized them into three. The first one being discrimination, sexual harassment, and equal rights. And there we will be looking at, or the information that I'm going to share with you comes from the Employment Equity Act, the Code of Good Practice on Harassment in the Workplace, which is just an extension of the Employment Equity Act. It was established because I can almost say it's a baby of the Employment Equity Act. And then we're also going to look at the Protection from Harassment Act 17 of 2011. And you will see how that is different from the other two. The second thing I want to discuss is maternity leave and family responsibility leave. There I'm not going to spend much time on because I believe Dr. Begicha also wants to share some information with you on that. And the legislation that we refer to in this regard for public sector doctors, we go to the DPSA Directive on Leave of Absence in the Public Service. And for women employed either in private practice or with companies, we look at the Basic Conditions of Employment Act and also workplace policies and contract of employment. So the last thing I want to look at, and this is also being looked at from a legal point of view, is systematic stresses, well-being and safety. And there we will give attention to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, again, the DPSA Directive on Leave of Absence, and the reason for that will become clear. And for women working in private, your workplace policies will be showing us what is allowed. So first of all, discrimination. So this is such a broad topic, and I'm very conscious of time because I know I only have 20 minutes. But this is a very interesting matter, and I want to just go through it and spend a little bit more time on it, because we do get a lot of questions from our doctors saying that I feel that I'm being discriminated against, or I feel harassed. And with this, I'm leaving out sexual harassment for now. We'll get to that. So discrimination could only be on one or more listed grounds or an arbitrary ground. Now, this stems from what is said in the Employment Equity Act in Section 6, subsection 1. And if you want to know what the listed grounds are, they are listed under the second bullet. I'm not going to go through all. I think there's 16 of them. I'm not going to go through all of them. But while I'm talking, you can have a look at them and familiarize yourself with the contents thereof. So the more important question is, if you feel discriminated against and you cannot group it or place it under any one of the listed grounds, does it mean that discrimination did not happen? It does not mean that discrimination did not happen, and that is why the legislation allows for discrimination to be challenged on arbitrary grounds. So the issue of arbitrary grounds, to me, this is quite a headache. Let me tell you why. An arbitrary ground is based on characteristics and attributes which have the potential to impair the fundamental dignity of a person as a human being or affect them adversely in a serious manner. Now, this is the definition of arbitrary ground, and this has been confirmed by the courts. So it looks easy. It looks easy because if you are finding yourself in a situation, you might feel that, yes, this is applicable to my situation because I feel that my dignity is being affected and it's adversely affecting me in a serious manner. But what the courts have said is that an arbitrary ground must be analogous to a listed ground. So you cannot come up with anything and say that this is now an arbitrary grounds. To prove discrimination on a listed as such, in order to prove discrimination, you must either refer it or link it to a listed ground or an arbitrary ground. So what the courts have said, and I've listed a specific case law, the Mkalipi case, and the full citation is there for you to see if you are interested in it. And what they said in this instance is that different treatment is not in itself discriminatory unless an arbitrary ground can be proven. Now, this does not necessarily take us closer to where we want to be because it's very, very vague. And what happened in this specific case is that it was two employees that were performing the same duties, and the one employee felt that there was a difference in treatment, and the courts found that the differentiation in treatment without linking it to an arbitrary ground that is similar to a listed ground was not sufficient to establish that discrimination took place. So you can see how problematic this is. And that is why at the bottom I'm saying that it is currently narrowly being applied by the courts, and we are truly hoping for further development and more insight from the courts in relation to this, because we do feel that the legislature is actually not assisting us with discrimination issues if the discrimination is not on a listed ground, because they make it so difficult for you to prove discrimination on an arbitrary ground. So this brings us to sexual harassment. Now, the previous slide that I discussed, the discrimination issues, that stems from the Code of Good Practice on Harassment in the Workplace. Now, previously, there was a separate code on the handling of sexual harassment cases in the workplace, and this has now been grouped together with other issues of discrimination and harassment in the workplace in the same Code of Good Practice. So the code recognizes sexual harassment as a form of discrimination and outlines measures to prevent and eliminate it. Employers have a duty to proactively prevent and address sexual harassment, implement policies, conduct risk assessments, and provide training. Sexual harassment is defined as the unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that violates an employee's rights and creates a barrier to equality in the workplace. So you can see why sexual harassment is being recognized as a form of discrimination, because there it talks about the equality in the workplace. it infringes on your right of equality in the workplace if you are being sexually harassed. And once again, the conduct must be linked to a prohibited or listed ground, but it's easier in this instance because clearly when you are being sexually harassed, it's either about your sex, your gender, or your sexual orientation. So it's much more easier to address issues of sexual harassment and pursue such issues rather than issues that are regarded as harassment or discriminatory that is listed to that is linked to an arbitrary ground. So just to enlighten you in terms of what you should do when you feel you are being harassed or discriminated against or being sexually harassed. First of all, you need to bring it to the attention of the employer. The employer has got a right to act in such instances. And if they do not take action and put a stop to the sexual harassment or the other harassment that you are facing, they can actually be facing quite detrimental effects at the end of the day. So what would happen is after you bring it to the attention of the employer, and for the public service employees, I would suggest that you put it in writing in the form of a grievance. From there on, if the employer does not resolve it internally or they fail to resolve it internally, you can take it externally. And issues of discrimination, and remember I said harassment and sexual harassment is regarded as a form of discrimination. That is something that the bargaining council, where we would normally refer our disputes as public sector employees, does not have jurisdiction. It must go to the CCMA. And the CCMA can only conciliate the matter. That means they can bring parties together to see if the matter can be settled. And if it cannot be settled, if the parties cannot agree on an arbitration in the CCMA, the matter will go to the Labour Court. So these issues are by no means quick and easy to resolve, but they have to be addressed, and you need to look after yourself in terms of your dignity in the workplace. So what is sexual harassment? We've looked at the definition thereof, but what a lot of people don't know is that sexual harassment does not have to be physical. It does not have to be the slap on the bum or the grabbing or whatever it is that you are facing. It can also be other things that you are facing. It can be verbal. It can be suggestive talk from a colleague or a male colleague or someone that is harassing you verbally in a sexual manner. It can also be psychological, and it can also be online. People should be aware of that it's also, if you receive an email from a colleague and there's a sexual undertone to that, that can also constitute sexual harassment. Or, for example, if the person shows you pornographic material, that can also be regarded as sexual harassment. And then the last one is mobbing. Now, mobbing means that you are being harassed by a group of people. In other words, a group of, I don't want to limit it to men, because discrimination, sexual harassment can go both ways. Men can also be sexually harassed in the workplace, but I'm referring to men as this is something that we are enlightening women about. So it can be a group of men that gang up on you and they continuously sexually harass you. So as women, there's so much that has been done for equality for women in the workplace, but the patriarchal norms have been entrenched so deeply into our society that stereotypes continue to persist and in the workplace, and it creates a biasness against female professionals, and female professionals must navigate this, and it actually just adds to the stress that already comes with your profession as a doctor. So the Employment Equity Act plays a crucial role in advancing women's rights in the workplace by addressing discrimination and promoting equal opportunities. The EEA promotes gender equality. The purpose is also to eliminate unfair discrimination This is as part of the Employment Equity Act, or also as per the code that we've discussed earlier. So furthermore, what the Employment Equity Act aims to do is to redress historical disadvantages faced by women in the past. And this is done through affirmative action. And another positive thing about affirmative action is to ensure equitable representation in various occupational levels, particularly in management levels. And a lot of emphasis has been placed on that in recent years, that women should also be occupying the higher positions in companies and institutions. So the last thing I want to touch on in terms of equal rights is equal pay for equal work value. So there's a caveat to this. So basically, generally speaking, in the public service, as a female head of unit, you would be expected to be remunerated on the same level as a male head of unit. And generally that is true, with the exception of you being maybe on different notches and grades. But generally speaking, this is what is supposed to happen. You should earn equal money for equal work. Now, there are differences to this as well, in the sense that you might find in private that you've been with a company that you are working at for 5 years, and your male colleague has been with a company for 15 years. And it goes without saying that there will be a difference in salary. So it might be justifiable in certain instances, but it's still something that you should look into if you are worried about it. So this is the part that I said I'm not going to spend much time on, because I know Dr. Bikicha has prepared quite a comprehensive presentation. And one of the things she is touching on is your leave rights within the workplace. I just want to point out a couple of things, and while I'm talking, you are welcome to have a look at what is listed on my screen, because I'm not going to touch on every single one. So there's a big difference between maternity leave in the public sector and maternity leave in the private sector. So in the public sector, you are guaranteed of 4 months maternity leave, even if you are a contractual employee, such as an intern, ComServe, or registrar. So I always say to the ladies, if at all possible, and I actually mean it in a joking manner, because it's not always possible to do family planning, to that specific point, but it's always great if you can have your baby during your community service year, because then you are not expected to work the time back. Whereas if you are an intern or a registrar, because you are in training, you are supposed to work the time back that you take, the 4 months that you take in maternity leave. So I just want to point out something else. Absences related to complications is covered by your sick leave. Okay, so if you, let's say, for example, you have complications with your pregnancy and your doctor's worried about you and want to book you off for a couple of days just to get some bed rest and recuperate a bit, that cannot be deducted from your maternity leave. It must come from your sick leave. The other one I wanted to point out to you that I find extremely lacking is the 10 days parental leave. So this is paternity leave, so the leave that fathers get when their child is born. And it's also applicable for adoption. So if you adopt a child, you only get 10 parental leave days. And I actually find that discriminatory, because I cannot think how you would be able to bond with a child within 10 days, especially if that child comes from a difficult background. So lastly, on the issue of leave, I just want to point out that in the public service, you get 5 days of family responsibility leave. That is normally when you've got a sick child, your spouse or life partner dies, or immediate family member dies. And in private, as per the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, that would be 3 days. I also find this lacking, and I find it actually quite ridiculous, because if your partner or spouse passes away, I don't think that you would be able to pick up the pieces within 5 days. Okay, so lastly, I want to talk on systematic stresses, well-being, and safety. So one thing that we need to touch on when we talk about the wellness of doctors in the workplace is abuse or harassment from patients. And even there, the employer's got an obligation to protect you from such action. So what can happen in this instance, how you can challenge it, apart from the normal process that I've explained to you, how you're going to make your employer aware through a grievance process or by reporting the incident or the continuous incident. So first of all, the Harassment Act allows you to get a protection order. So if it's stalking kind of behavior and you are really worried about your safety, then you should approach someone to assist you with a protection order. The other option is under PEPUDA, the equality courts can assist with making a determination on such treatment. And then obviously, depending on the severity of the harassment or abuse from a patient, you can even lay criminal charges. Another thing that we find quite predominantly among female, not only female, among doctors as a whole, is burnout from heavy workloads and resource shortages. And something that's on the rise that I'm really concerned about is where we see the burnout among the junior doctors. And the thing is if they get burned out to the point where they cannot resume their duties for quite a number of months, it impacts on their training, and it might also impact on their ComServe time, which means that because they are not independent practitioners, they might be limited in terms of what they can do if they do not finish the internship or the community service. That is a discussion for another day. So another thing that stresses our doctors is insufficient infrastructure. And I mean, we know how it goes, especially in the public service with equipment and medication and everything that you might need in order to provide quality service to your patients. And that is also something that stresses an individual. So what can be done if you find yourself in a situation where you feel that you are going to burn out, you can no longer cope? You need to look into the option of temporary incapacity leave. That basically means that you can go off work for a limited period of time, and it will be on full pay. You will not get your commuted overtime, but you will be given your basic salary and your benefits. And it will give you an opportunity to just recuperate and then just take a deep breath and get back into the workplace a little bit recharged. So it is a possibility if you get to the point where you feel burned out. It should not be approached lightly, because you do not want to give the employer the idea that you are unfit to practice or unfit to work, because then they might actually say that, you know what, since you have taken temporary incapacity leave and we feel that you're not ready to return to work, we might make it a permanent thing. So it's not to be abused, but it is there as an option. Then also most employers, both private and public, have employee wellness programs. Make use of those programs. And if you ask for assistance and you are not given assistance, contact SAMA. We can assist you with this and we can help you with this. We can reach out to your management and ensure that you are enrolled in such a program, or if it's not available in your institution, that they take positive steps in order to get you assistance. So unsafe working conditions jeopardizing safety, training, and well-being. As we know, South Africa is not a safe country, and I think this is something that women also face on a regular basis, is that you find yourself in an area where you feel unsafe, and it can actually be detrimental to your safety. And we have had such reports from our female doctors in the past where they've been adversely affected by crime or unsafe working conditions. So apart from that, there's a duty on the employer to provide and maintain a working environment that is safe and without risk. And this is the Occupational Health and Safety Act that puts this duty on the employer. So something that is also interesting that most people don't know is that there are other duties on the employer, particularly when it comes to women. And they must assess the risk, eliminate and mitigate risks, provide protective equipment, and not expose women to hazardous chemicals that may impact their reproductive health, their pregnancy, or breastfeeding mothers. And the interesting thing is this is not only provided for by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, this is also in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. There's a code of good practice on pregnancy and breastfeeding, and you've got rights in terms of those things. So also, if you find yourself in a situation where that is not being recognized, or you're not being at least given a little bit of leeway in order to look after your well-being as a new mother who is breastfeeding, you need to let us know. Or it goes without saying, if you are pregnant and you feel that you are being exploited and you are being put at risk. The consequences of non-compliance to the employer is fines and imprisonment. This is under the Occupational Health and Safety Act again. And then there can also be civil liability. I mean, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel that your employer knowingly put you in a situation that impacted on your pregnancy and you have, you lose your baby, for example, you can actually hold the employer accountable, and they can face a civil liability, which basically just means that you can approach a court for damages. And then lastly, if you should experience problems in the workplace that affect your health adversely, the compensation claims can also be submitted through COIDA. So ladies, this is the last that I've got to say on this. I'm not too sure whether there are any questions. I can't see any hands, but I will leave it to our facilitator to indicate whether they will be taking questions. And lastly, I just want to leave you with this. This is such a beautiful quote from Michelle Obama. There's no limit to what we as women can accomplish. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for a powerful discussion and presentation. Colleagues, do feel free to post any questions or any comments that you might have in our Q&A box at the bottom of your screen for Letitia, and then towards the end we will have a Q&A session with both of our speakers. But thank you once again.
Thank you, Dr.
Only a pleasure. Next up, we are going to be introducing Dr. Zanele Bigicha, who is the SAMA Vice Chairperson as well as a Women's Wing Committee member. He holds a medical degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and has served with the National Department of Health since 2010. She's been a committed leader from her student days, serving as the former Youth League branch member at the Nelson Mandela School of Medicine, and she's also held various leadership roles, including being local and central SRC member, provincial treasurer for SASCO in KwaZulu-Natal, as well as the UKZN College of Health Sciences representative. Currently, she is the CEO and manager of the Mfundo Arnold Lushaba Community Health Center and serves as the LTT chairperson for the Zumbe sub-district in Ugu. He's also a board director of the South African Medical Association, as I have mentioned, a member of its executive council, as well as being an active member of the KZN Coastal branch. Dr. Bigicha, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Monique. I hope I'm audible.
You are, thank you, Doctor.
All right. No, colleagues, I would like to welcome everybody here tonight. And I am almost, about to put my seat down because Letitia seems to have, talked a lot about what I'm about to say. But colleagues, without further ado, let me start my presentation. Okay, so colleagues, as well as said, I am Dr. Zanele Bigicha. I think they've given you my profile. So on
Sorry,
my
Dr.
side,
Bigicha?
hello?
I can't see your presentation yet.
Okay, sorry. Let's just make sure that we are sharing this presentation. Are you able to see
There
it
you
now?
go. It's coming up now. And then just
Okay.
full screen. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Renee. So, as I had said, I'm Dr. Zanele Bikicha, and they've already given you my CV. I won't spoil what Monique has done. And we will be discussing, the issues of women in the workplace. I must put a disclaimer first to say that my references are more to those are employed within the public space. And then obviously as well, we're looking at your permanent employment. When you start becoming a contractual employee, the calculations, it's prorated. So that's just the one disclaimer that I want to put, that it is looking more at permanent employees and also more in the public space so that we don't get confused about some of the issues. Um, so I thought my first slide needs to talk about the Woman's Wing. As you know, this is August, and this is part of the Woman's Wing takeover of Women's Month. We've decided to have a series of webinars. So briefly, just to let you know, so I'll be talking about the Women's Wing quickly, then we'll go into the leave entitlements, and we'll be talking about harassment as well and then support that you can get. And then I wanted to end off my presentation with some good news. So being in SAMA, I am a member of the South African Medical Association's Women's Wing. It's headed by a phenomenal woman. And our group of women, when we came together to decide what we want to achieve with the Women's Wing, these were the items that we were looking at. It was one, to fight for access of females into the medical profession. Because if you cannot even access it, whether due to the school you come from, not having access to STEM subjects or funding, all of that needs to be addressed so that we can have female doctors entering. So our first basis was access. Then retention. We know that when you are within medical school or within specializing, women face different challenges than men do in getting through their careers. I mean, just getting pregnant alone takes you out as a woman in terms of being able to complete on record time beyond the other challenges that you face. Then, obviously, the success aspect. How do we ensure that women are also able to succeed? Finish in record time. We know that men have always been mentoring each other, had the men's club, have the support network around them, which allows them just to focus on their education, unlike women. So we thought we need to look at the success aspect as well. We also wanted to make it a space for professional networking so that we as women can get together and look at what we are doing and perhaps build networks, do greater things as women in pharma and in medicine. We also wanted to look at the issue of mentorship because we know that you as a woman cannot make it alone. We all need that guide, that mentor, that accountability partner that will help you along your journey into becoming the kind of physician that you are wanting. We also wanted to offer self-development opportunities because we do believe that, continuous development is critical in remaining relevant in medicine and also making sure that you upskill yourself. Then also a big issue that the Women's Wing wants to look at is influencing policy. We need more women's voices in the policy-making space that are going to make sure that our voices are heard and that the health sector is responsive to the plight of women. And then we looked at the issues of gender mainstreaming. How do we ensure that in everything that is done, in all the planning, there is gender mainstreaming? Medicine needs to take into cognizance the fact that there is females and males. Look at the fact that it was always known that either being an orthopod or being a surgeon was purely male. And that was based on just the pure physicality of it. We now have AI, we've got robotics, so gender mainstreaming to allow females into the spaces where they were never there before. So that was just a little brief on the woman's wing. I thought, let me just take a few minutes to do that. Colleagues, we're looking at the different leaves. There's a whole lot of leaves, but I've decided just to touch on the ones that will affect you as a woman, and then also looking at you as a woman becoming a mother. So obviously, Gail, within the public sector, you've got your entitlement. So after you've been working for more than your 10 years, you then acquire your 30 years in terms of your annual leave. So that is the first section of leave that you as a then have access to. There is also what is called prenatal leave, and currently that is up to 8 working days of prenatal leave. This is per pregnancy. I think the most important thing to note here with your prenatal leave, you can take it as hours. It does not need to be the complete day. You never know what's going to happen in your pregnancy. It might be a complicated pregnancy. So sometimes it might be better just to take the half morning off and to go and see if it's a regular checkup and then come back and only fill in your hours. But per pregnancy, you've got 8 consecutive leave days. The qualification obviously is that you must have the medical records to back you up when you come and fill in your leave with your supervisor. And then obviously with prenatal leave, this is a planned leave. So your supervisor should be aware that you've got a scheduled appointment when it comes to prenatal leave. I think our first speaker already said, should it be an illness, this doesn't fall within any maternity leave. It will be taken from your normal sick leave. If it's illness related, even though the illness is in pregnancy. If it's not a normal course of events, it can be taken from your sick leave. Okay, just to also add, in case you've got a complicated pregnancy, if you end up using all the 8 days within your pregnancy, you can then negotiate with your employer that you use your annual leave if it's still available, or you can also negotiate for unpaid leave if you've exhausted it. And just to remind you guys, annual leave in government, it's over a 3-year cycle. I mean, sick leave, sorry. Your sick leave is over a 3-year cycle. When it comes to maternity leave now, you are allowed a period of 4 consecutive calendar months of maternity leave. Generally, it is said that you should be gone from around 2 weeks from your estimated date of delivery. So as you're planning with your supervisor, he does ask when is your due date, and generally you plan not to be at work from 2 weeks prior to that. Some people do also, after they give birth, decide that because they're losing out on overtime and they're not getting paid the same, they then decide to come back. Within HR policy, we normally can look at this if you are over the 6 weeks mark and if you're getting a all go or a green light from your physician who says that you are fit to practice if you decide to come back early from your maternity leave. But we must also note, guys, that certain things can disrupt your maternity leave plan. So if your baby becomes, born earlier than planned, that will change the timeline. And also, if your baby is hospitalized for a long period during the maternity leave, that also might have an impact on the type of maternity leave that you need to negotiate with your employer. Okay, all right. I've already said that we generally don't take you back before 6 weeks unless you've gotten the medical all clear. And should you decide, and some doctors do this, to extend the maternity leave, they do try and combine it with leave. But some, if they're finished, do also ask for an unpaid leave. Currently, you're allowed to take up to 184 calendar days, but I highlight, colleagues, this is on condition of negotiation with your supervisor. They might not be in the space to be able to support that cap of unpaid leave days, but it is something to look into if you're wanting to extend your maternity leave. Um, at the bottom, unfortunately, we do need to discuss the issues that should you unfortunately have a miscarriage in the third trimester, you are entitled to your 6 weeks of maternity leave. If you do end up experiencing that, unfortunately. We did also talk about adoption leave. So if you are able to take adoption leave, we now have an update because they've been fixing. So you can take, a maximum of about 45 working days, they say. But the problem is that this needs to be shared between both partners. So you can't both have the same amount of days as partners. One, if both of you guys are going to take the combination of the two cannot exceed the 45. One of the issues that is never ever raised, though, is the fact that this only applies from the time that the child is officially given to you by the court. And prior to that, there's normally placement. So that's unfortunately one of the things that we need our government to look into because the child is first placed with you before formal adoption. So that is another one of those gray areas when it comes to this kind of a leave. Then we are keeping up with the modern times. There is surrogacy leave. So we're glad to say that when you do decide to extend your family through surrogacy, you are allowed your calendar months with your baby once the baby is born. So that is good news there to say we do recognize that families are made in different ways and shapes. With the surrogacy leave, though, it needs to be accompanied by the relevant legal paperwork. So there is you who is going to be the commissioning parent, so the parent who's going to be receiving the child, and then there must be an agreement from the surrogate. So the surrogate also needs to have an agreement that they give you in support of this. I think that's on my next slide. So for the surrogate mother again, if it so happens that the surrogate mother is in the public sector as well, they are entitled to 6 weeks. Unfortunately, not the 4 months. They're entitled to the 6 weeks, but they must get a certificate of medical fitness at the end of that 6 weeks just to make sure that they are fit to come back. And like I said, when entering into the surrogacy and commissioning, there must be the legal paperwork that accompanies the leave documents to show that there is an agreement. Then we do have paternity leave. I know my previous speaker was also complaining about it, saying that it's definitely not enough paternity leave. And what most guys do is they combine it with family leave, and it ends up balancing somewhere to around 10 days. So yeah, we're not quite there yet with making males responsible for also, being there in the initial phases of a baby being born. But also, like we said, they've got the option of taking their annual leave if they've got. to extend this. And if they don't, then they can also end up negotiating for unpaid leave with their employer if they see that this paternity leave is not going to be enough. Sometimes, you do have that complicated baby, or you do need to support the mother because she might be going through postnatal depression or something. So those are the options that are available for them. Family responsibility leave. I think we've covered most of the family issues. So you can use the family responsibility leave as a guide just to add into your paternity leave. That's what I wanted to stress here so that we don't forget to put it. There is that option available. But as said, it must be accompanied by proof. So it would be record of birth from the doctor or a medical certificate or some proves that yes, indeed, you are the father, you were with your partner. In looking at these policies, I like I said, this public sector, I'm a CEO, medical manager, but I'm inherently biased to women. And there's a few gaps that I think that we need to look at. And hopefully, as, Women's Wing, as women in our own collective spaces where we are leading, we're going to be able to address certain things. Like, firstly, the design of workspaces. Workspaces are not designed to support women, particularly women who are new mothers. You don't have rooms where they can go and do breastfeeding. If you are on call, there is no place where you can come and bring your baby to be with you on call. Some workplaces, it would be nice if we could follow some private workplaces where there are creches in the actual workspace. So the actual design of the workspace itself does not lend itself to gender mainstreaming. Then the issue of inflexible work hours. If you are truly wanting to support a parent, we should be at a space where we are able to meet the work demands of the 40-hour workday while allowing flexibility. I mean, parents end up having to fetch a child, parents end up with doctor's appointments. So why can we not, have flexible work hours which still give you the gap to be a parent, but also comply with the amount of time that needs to be spent to make sure that you are gainfully employed for what you are paid for. We've complained with my previous speaker around the duration of leave. We've got countries where you get a year paid off when you are a mother. And that is amazing, and it's very supportive and make sure that the child is given all the full attention it needs during that critical developmental stage. Then I actually asked my HR, and I was shocked to find that I couldn't find a lactation policy. So this might just be one of the policies I'm noticing, but we don't even have a lactation policy that says that if you're a breastfeeding mother, you can take so many minutes every whatever to go and do your lactation and things like that. Then another thing that becomes a problem with the way that our leave policies are placed. A child is not necessarily only going to get sick for 1 or 2 days. We have children that have chronic illnesses and children with special needs, which require recurrent medical care, prolonged admissions. And our leave does not accommodate for that, even though there is a diagnosis in place. I mean, I've had a friend whose child had cancer, but despite the cancer diagnosis, there was no exception to the amount of time they were given to deal with their child, despite the fact that the diagnosis is there and that the child needed the parent to be with them during the treatment. Then also looking at the loss of income that you suffer as a female because you will not be getting paid your overtime while you are, at home looking after your child. And unfortunately, that's a point where life becomes expensive. So we do need to say, why is it that women are punished and lose, income during such a vital time? Then something else that, people were discussing, we laugh about it, but things like premenstrual syndrome, they are really a thing. So we should be advocating, to say, at least, for those that have this, we should have, even if it's 1 or 2 days within a sick leave year, that if a woman really is suffering from premenstrual syndrome, that she be allowed to take the time off. Then I wanted to touch on harassment in the workplace. My previous speaker also did try and go into harassment. And we want to make it very clear, harassment comes in different forms. There's physical harassment, there's verbal harassment, there's sexual harassment, there's financial harassment, there's intimidation, there's also supervisory harassment, well, which happens in the workplace. And then you can also look at things like your nepotism and favoritism, which happen in the workplace. And if at any point, colleagues, you are confused as a female, if it feels unwanted and does not make you comfortable, I suggest that you go and consult, because that might indicate that you are suffering from some form of harassment in the workplace. Harassment is not only physical, it's unwanted, and it's something that makes you uncomfortable in your own working environment. There is support, however, in the workplace, so that we don't think that we've got no options as females. Firstly, the most important tool that you've got to support you is your contract of appointment. Your contract of appointment lays out your rights. It lays out your recourses if you've got issues. It lays out your chain of command. It lays out your dispute resolutions. It lays out your grievance procedures. So your contract is your first weapon in terms of how to deal with problems in the workplace. You then have labor relations officers, which are there so that they can advise you where you feel that your labor rights are being trampled on. You can approach labor relations. They will then listen to your situation and interpret it according to what is in the LRA and the contract that you've signed. Most workplaces now do have employee assistance programs, so we do encourage our members and any woman to take part in employee assistance, because it really is there for you and your physical and mental well-being. Other places also do offer counseling. I know that some of us don't feel comfortable in taking part in counseling in the workplace, because we feel that, it's not a safe space. But better to go for counseling than end up not being mentally well, or ending up with postnatal depression or burnout in the workplace. Then debriefing, we are in the medical fraternity. So we see a lot of trauma. We see death around us all the time. So it's important, colleagues, to establish a culture of debriefing amongst each other, particularly after you've witnessed something, Like our previous speaker said, we even get attacked and insulted by patients. So by debriefing, it's almost a group counseling session that you can have. Then finding a mentor in the workplace as well, it helps, because they can then also help you navigate those challenges and navigate how they did it when you are trying to find the life work balance. There are workplace forums, some are for women, some are for parents, some are for religious reasons, but try and find workplace forums that resonate with you, because it also gives you a social network at work. Then every place or every workplace, they should have some avenue of whistleblowing, which should allow you to report things anonymously if you do not feel that you yourself can go and report to your supervisor or directly. There should be some sort of whistleblowing avenues available to you, even if it's just anonymous letters to HR. Then in my final slide, colleagues, there is good news for us as females in South Africa, particularly. One, the fact that we've got what has been world renowned as a gender inclusive and non-sexist constitution. So that document it's world renowned and it's there, and hopefully it's going to infiltrate its way into all the policies to make it look like the vision that the constitution had. We also currently, in our favor, have the fact that equity targeting is looking at putting more women in management roles. So that is good news for us. I know in the health space, it was a bit skewed because we had so many nurses that are females that the management level started being exclusively male because of equity, but they've started looking into that. So equity target looking at putting more women in management roles. Our policies are also becoming more inclusive as we go. We know we're looking at LGBT issues. We are starting to ask how are we supporting women. So policies are starting to become more inclusive as we go. Gender mainstreaming is happening, and gender mainstreaming, it can happen in the subtle little things. It's about having your she bins available in the bathroom so that you can dispose of your pad. It's about making sure that the furniture does not expose you as a woman. You don't need to, hide your legs. So gender mainstreaming and looking at how to make women comfortable in the workplace is happening. Then there are now, universities like Stellenbosch, I know that are starting to produce management and training programs that are directed strictly at women and developing women. So that is great because they're seeing the need to capacitate women. And then also, there is access to grant funding and incubator hubs for women that are now coming up in the SMME spaces. I know as doctors, we've never thought of ourselves in the business sector or in the business mindset, but now that funding is starting to be available. Let's utilize it and let's start seeing what we can do as women in business and in medicine, particularly ahead of the age of the NHI. So I thought, let me just end on the good news to say that it's not all gloom and doom for women. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Zanile, for a packed and powerful, extremely insightful presentation. We really do appreciate that. Colleagues, please be reminded to post any questions and comments that you have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So I am just going to ask Letitia and Dr. Zanile to please set up the videos again, please, to appear back on screen for our Q&A session at this point. Letitia, are you still with us?
There we go. I just have something open on my screen that's confusing me.
Thank you so much, ladies, once again to both of you for your presentations this evening. And I just wanted to ask to you, Letitia, from a legal standpoint, and to you, Dr. Zanile, as a medical manager, what are the options that we have as women who are working either in private or in public hospitals when we find ourselves being the subject of harassment or discrimination, but from patients or their relatives or their escorts? What is it that we can do? Again, like I asked Letitia from your side, from the legal standpoint, and then Dr. Zanile on your side as from a management perspective. Thank you. I'll take Letitia first.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So firstly, there are a couple of things. It depends on what type of harassment we are talking about. If we are talking about a patient that assaults you, obviously assault is a criminal offense and you can report it to the police. You should also report it to your employer. And then also, if you are looking at behavior that is stalking in nature, in other words, a patient becomes infatuated with you, you can actually get a protection order against that patient. So I think the most important thing is and the first and foremost thing to do is report the incident to your management. I remember a female doctor in one of the hospitals in Johannesburg. She was assaulted by a patient because she did not want to give a patient a repeat prescription as she felt that it was not necessary. And we had to get involved. Unfortunately, she reported it to her management, and there were measures that we felt could have been implemented in order for her to be more protected in the specific space she was working in. And what happened is that management they were not oblivious to the issue that she was facing danger, but they were slow in taking action. So we intervened and we got on board and we said to them, listen, you've got an obligation under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to ensure a safe working environment for your employees. So basically what happened at the end of the day is they installed, for example, I remember one of the things that they did was to install a safety door and with a security guard in front so that the patients, when they go in, they go through the safety door and through the security guard. And the security guard was stationed where the doctor was working because she was working in quite an isolated area. So yes, there are things. The first and foremost thing is report it to your management. And please, if you do not get support or if they do not take you seriously or act swiftly, reach out to someone. We can assist you.
Thank you very much, Letitia. Dr. Zanele.
Hi, thank you for that. So for me, the most important part is first getting yourself out of that situation. So you either need to walk away, call security, call for help, get yourself immediately out of the situation because things can escalate. We must remember that not only do we treat mental health care users, but we also treat people that are intoxicated and not necessarily acting as normal. So the first thing is to get yourself out. Then document. We fail to do this after an incident happens, but once it's happened, you document and you send to your supervisor and also copy in whoever is the head of the institution, because that might not be the same people, so that there is evidence that this event happened and this is what you underwent. Then obviously again, they will have to do their own investigations, if there's cameras, if there's whatever, and come back with the report to you. But the most important thing is get yourself out of it and document it. And then another thing that as females, generally, we need to make sure that within our spaces, never ever be in a closed room alone with the patient. That in itself is not safe. And also make sure that when you are, working, be aware that there is securities and all that around. But I think for me, that's the advice I would give you. Document and inform your supervisor. And then obviously, like she said, depending on the nature of what was done, you might need to go for a more criminal proceedings if it was something of that nature. If it was an internal matter, you then could lay a grievance as well. But like she said, if you're still confused, we're definitely here as SAMA and will help you classify the exact incident that happened. But most important, get yourself somewhere safe first.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Zanele. Just we have another question in our Q&A box around harassment. I'm going to put you to floor, so I would like to get a brief response from both of you again as well. And the question is around emotional or sexual harassment from senior management or from senior doctors. And it's asking around any advice on how to navigate such a situation around, particularly around the fear of victimization. Dr. Zanele, would you like to provide us with some insight?
Yeah, it becomes very difficult, especially if the person is your supervisor. Um, One, I encourage people to make sure that you're documenting. If they are sending you inappropriate messages, you save those messages, you screenshot. If they are calling you and saying inappropriate things, you record those conversations. Then it's also important to make sure that you elicit that this attention is unwanted, that you are not enjoying or you are not favorable to those advances. Make that clear and known to the individual. And if they then still persist, you've got your you've let them know that this is happening and I'm not happy. You then can go to HR because most companies have a zero gender-based or sexual harassment policy against. It does take guts, unfortunately, for you to do that. But one of the things, at least this summer, we do allow you to have a representative. We've got teams that can go on your behalf and make those representations. But it's important to make sure that you're letting that person know that I'm not enjoying this. Whatever they send to you, you send, and also then avoid making sure that you are in the same space with that individual alone until you sort that out with the HR if the person is still persistent.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zanele. It is truly a sensitive situation indeed, and it does require a lot of courage. Letitia, would you like to provide us with some brief insights on this question?
Yes, thank you, Doc. I agree with Dr. Bagicha with what she said. It takes guts, and unfortunately, we get employees that report things to us, and we advise them, and then you follow them up a week later, and they said, you know what, I haven't reported it yet. So don't subject yourself to such treatment from your supervisors or your seniors. Please, the normally what should happen is that there should be protection from the employer against victimization. For example, the policy would provide for such protection. And apart from that, if, like Dr. Zanelli said, the acts continue, you make it known that you are not interested in the advances that are being made, and it persists, and the matter is addressed by your management or by your labor relations or HR within the institution, and it still persists, then I would say you would need to go as far as getting a protection order against that person. And as the senior would then be at the receiving end of the protection order, management will have to take action against that person in order to ensure that they remove them from the workplace and ensure that you, as the complainant, have a safe working environment.
No, thank you so much for that response, Letitia. Our next question is also from the Q&A box, and I think it's directed more towards Letitia, but again, Letitia, can provide us with your insight. And it's asking around clarity on family responsibility leave, particularly in the state sector as it pertains to women who are married and then have their in-laws fall ill or pass on. And they're just asking whether the doctor can take family responsibility leave for in-laws or for adult children. So not necessarily only for immediate family.
Doc, so the answer is multifaceted. First of all, in terms of in-laws, they are not regarded as your immediate family. So I know in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, they exclude in-laws. It's not specifically excluded, but basically, if you look at the definition of direct family members, it does not include your in-laws. Dr. Bagicha might be able to provide more clarity on what is the situation in the public service, whether, according to my knowledge and understanding, it does not. The DPSA directive does not provide for family responsibility leave in the event that an in-law passes. But as for adult children, yes, your child remains your child, whether they are 5 years old or 25 or 35 years old. So yes, in that instance, definitely you can take family responsibility leave with regards to an adult child.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much,
no,
Dr.
it's
Daniela.
definitely the same in public sector. They're
Sure.
not considered your family responsibility.
I
You'd
thought
have
so,
to
Doc.
apply for it under your annual leave.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, ladies. I now have a question that I want to direct towards Dr. Zanele, and it just speaks to how, as medical manager, are you able to balance enforcing institutional or workplace policies with supporting women doctors who might be facing either legal or workplace challenges, just in your role, like a bit of a practical insight into how you are able to balance these policies with your role as having to support women?
Yeah, you're asking a very interesting question. So, you get different types of managers. So, with my management approach is one, I believe in capacitating. So, in general, when it comes to my clinicians, I try and make sure that they are capacitated as much as possible. So, this is not just on clinical skills, because obviously they must be clinically competent, but we have HR come in service them on their COT, on new labor laws or circulars. So you make sure that they are always capacitated and knowledgeable about what is going on in the workplace. So another thing that I do and make sure that I keep vibrant in my institution is ensuring that labor representation is set. So we have a forum with labor so that those issues that are burning, underground, they find expression within labor, and you can address those issues, because then you'll be able to touch the ground on things that might be, upsetting, your employees in the workplace. And then when it comes to the actual females, in my department, I tend to be biased and tend to have one-on-one sessions and tell them that, I don't do people that don't progress. I'm a producer. I keep cream out. So I always use my, we call them EPMDS sessions, where you're having reviews on performance, just to find out, so what is your next goal? What are you studying? What do you want to do? Where can I develop you? Is there any course you're interested in? So I'm biased to them in that way. So I believe in capacitation. I believe in making sure that they academically are excelling, and having a vibrant labor forum can address, the major issues like your crime, your whatever, because all of that will come out if you've got labor representation. So I think that's how I try and make sure it's a conducive environment.
Thank you so, so much. I think that the next comment in our Q&A is a good segue into the next question that I actually wanted to pose to both of you. There's a comment around victimization and the subjective nature or the misinterpretation of it by particularly junior doctors, especially when they have performed procedures, haven't performed procedures correctly, or they perform the wrong procedures, and when being addressed, then accuse seniors of harassment, of harassment. And my question was then going to be again, ladies, to both of you, whether there are any specific protections that we need to be aware of earlier in our careers, particularly to clarify issues around victimization and harassment, especially as a young female doctor entering the workforce. Tatisha, would you like to provide us with some of your insights?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mohale. Dr. Mohale, you're raising something interesting. I think victimization must not be clouded in the sense that when you are reprimanded by a senior, you should not take an isolated incident or an incident resulting from doing an incorrect procedure or doing the procedure incorrectly as victimization. Obviously, if after such an occurrence there's continuous I don't want to call, yeah, let's call it victimization. If there's continuous victimization and you could clearly see that this senior has now decided and they've put a red dot on your head and they're out to get you, then you must definitely take action and address it as soon as possible. But in terms of being reprimanded, I think you must, I think we should look at it from the point of view that we discussed discrimination earlier. And the issue of an arbitrary ground is I find it quite applicable in this instance, because it says you must look at the situation as if to establish whether it impacts on your dignity as a human being. And I think if you undergo treatment by a senior and you feel that it's affecting your dignity as a human being, then obviously it needs to be addressed further.
Thank you so much for that response, Letitia. Dr. Zanele?
Okay. So, firstly, for me, one, we need to remember that junior doctors are doctors in training. We are there to take them from medical school and the theory in a space where they are making decisions and learning and performing life procedures. So one, that needs to be the mindset of a senior. No interaction at any point should ever leave you feeling dehumanized. You might make a mistake clinically, and I come and I say to you, look, this is not how you perform this. You've used the wrong suture, you put the ICD incorrectly. But what I say should not leave you feeling dehumanized. That is where the fine line is when I'm talking to you about work and where you've gone wrong, and then coming on the other side where I'm attacking even your character, calling you incompetent and all those things. So that's the one of the differences, the way that you leave feeling the experience. But also, when it comes to you as a junior, when a person identifies issues, don't take it personally. You're there to train, you're there to learn. And they then must put in a plan to say, look, I saw you struggled on 1, 2, 3. Maybe you can come and assist me in 2 Caesars, and I'll show you how you can do this and how you can do that. So there must be a plan to develop you holistically as a person. But for me, the fundamental part is how it's addressed and how it leaves you feeling as a human being after they've discussed it with you. But as an intern or a junior, understand that you're in this training space. You're not going to know everything, but at the same time, seniors need to know that they address them correctly and they address the clinical deficit, not attack character.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. I want to, in closing, pose a final question to each of you. And Letitia, I would just like to ask whether there are any legal reforms or policy changes that you would like to see changed, brought up, or be done as a means of better supporting women within the medical field?
Yes, and I want to come back to the discrimination issue. As you can see, it's quite close to my heart. I feel that there's a gap there. And what I would like to see is that they make harassment as a form of discrimination easier to address, and that it's not only something that can be addressed if you link it to a listed ground or an arbitrary ground. And as I've explained during my presentation, establishing something or proving that something is an arbitrary ground and it's analogous to a listed ground is an extremely difficult thing. Even the courts are finding it hard to do. So I would love to see that the code of good practice on eliminating workplace harassment and discrimination is fine-tuned to the point where it gives an opportunity to people to really address issues of harassment without having to prove that the harassment was done for a specific reason. Because as we know, workplace bullying and harassment is not necessarily because you are a certain race, a certain gender, a certain level of education. It can also just be because someone just don't like you. And that kind of provision is not made. And I would like to see some development there. Whether it will happen, I'm not 100% sure. I think the legislature is scared to open it up to the point where every single thing will be regarded as harassment. Any form, as Dr. Brigitte now said, you find junior doctors in the training space, and those doctors must sometimes be put on the right path or assisted in order to ensure that they get adequate training. And we don't want such instances to be seen as harassment if it really does not constitute harassment. So I think the legislature is cautious, but I would love to see some development in that regard because I feel it is lacking.
Thank you very much, Leticia. Dr. Zanele, in closing, I would also like to ask you how women in medicine can better position themselves for leadership roles whilst navigating all these legal or workplace challenges and barriers.
Yeah, I think you, as a woman, stop. We want to do everything. You don't need to do everything. You don't need to be everything. You don't need to do everything. Delegate. There things that you really can get away with not doing to free up your time so that you can then focus on other pursuits. So something as minor as that you've got somebody who does the laundry and all of that, so that that is not on your table at the end of the day. So delegate. There's a lot of things that we put ourselves through as women. We want to be everything, we want to be everywhere. You cannot. So delegate so that you free your time to be able then to focus on what you want in terms of your career path. Then when it comes to your career path, I think you're gonna have to accept the fact that it's continuous professional development. There is no running away from it because in the management space, things are always changing. There's always new adaptations. So you need to make sure that you're somebody who's willing to keep up with what is going on and make sure that, okay, at the end of the day, I also do have the paperwork to back me up, because a leader also needs to give people confidence. They need to know that you've got experience in what you're talking about. So invest in yourself, not just by the getting rid of the fluff, but invest in yourself. Go to those conferences where they're going to give you the updates. Enroll in those courses where they are going to, upskill you on different things. That's investing in yourself and making sure that you're a better leader than future. And I think another thing that we also leave out is the soft skills. So things like what do we call this, change management. That becomes a huge issue when you're a leader. You think the work is going to become the problem. Meantime, it's change management and handling people. Go and learn HR. So that's the advice that I would give to people. Focus on what you need to do, develop yourself, and outsource the rest. Don't ever feel like you're less than a woman by doing the outsourcing, to give yourself more time to develop yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zanele, for that response. Again, Leticia and Dr. Zanele, thank you so much for your insightful presentations and these discussions that we've been able to have. Colleagues, I certainly hope that you have gleaned so much from our session this evening, and that you feel better positioned to take care of yourself from a legal standpoint. Please remember to reach out to Sama should you have any additional questions or any additional legal questions that you might have, or sticky situations that you might find yourself in. And thank you to the Women's Wing for allowing me and providing me with the opportunity to facilitate our session this evening. I hope that you join us for the remainder of the series, and that you have a lovely evening further. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohale. Goodbye.
Thank you guys for